Today, the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, that's the conduit for federal funds to NPR and PBS, announced it's shutting down.
Who do they bring in to fix it? They bring in Miss Maher, who has a history and commentary of promoting Marxist ideology, including critical theory.
But when I look at the range of our programmings on public broadcasting,
said we should not use the terms boy or girl, has called our president a deranged racist sociopath.
I can't make any.
And said that our reverence for the truth has become a distraction.
I can't make any sense of an argument that we are somehow biased in any way.
Funds for NPR, PBS, and other public media outlets have officially run out.
Let's start the show.
Breaking news.
Turn the TV on right now, dude. This is huge. I'm going to be on the news.
Whatever it is, it's not right on a teleprompter.
All right, let's go over your sources again. I want to hear it.
As for the first time ever, a hockey arena becomes a scene of violence.
We're going to tell this story. We're going to tell it right.
A woman is considered being in her prime in her 20s and 30s and maybe 40s. Sorry.
Fucking thing sucks.
The transformation from news into entertainment is disconcerting.
2 of our 4 helicopters were hit, including the one I was in.
Thanks, Tom.
No one ever gives you the full story.
That newscaster.
I hate trusting anybody.
That bastard newscaster.
You can't have a free society without a free press.
Get another source.
How many fucking sources do you think we've got?
That's not
Journalism.
Yes, welcome into another episode of That's Not Journalism, the only podcast that really rocks. I'm Dotto, and today we are talking public propaganda. We take a look at taxpayer-funded media and accusations of extreme left-wing bias in said media. We examine the case of local PBS station snafu and the federal fallout. By the way, do the devastating funding cuts matter or not? Plus, just what is, or should I say was, the Smith-Mundt Act? And why is it important to this episode? All that today and more. Before we kick off the fun, be sure to like and subscribe on YouTube. New episodes premiere weekly, and if you listen on Spotify and other platforms, follow us and then leave us a 5-star review and tell us how hypocritical, biased, and stupid we are. Federal funding is being cut to our public media outlets across TV sets, device screens, and radio dials from Boston to Boca to Buena Vista up to Bellingham, Washington. Turns out when 100% of taxpayers are forced to give their money to public media, some would like it to reflect the beliefs and views of everybody. What do they teach on Sesame Street? Something about being all-inclusive? They mean inclusive and an exclusive club, of course.
Viewers trust a deep male voice and huge throbbing forehead veins.
Today we're asking this question regarding PBS and NPR alike. When corruption runs rampant on Capitol Hill, should taxpayer money go to media outlets? Because what's stopping a trickle-down effect? All the time we hear from both sides of the aisle and independents that lobbyists get away with fuck all. Are you telling me there's some magic wall protecting the objectivity of state media in this country? So government corruption won't reach our precious souls? Perhaps the heads of these media corporations are the protectors of truth.
I'm a little better than everyone else here.
There are 2 stalwart stallions expected to protect public journalism, and let's meet them. Starting us off is the President and Chief Executive Officer of the Public Broadcasting Service, Paula Kerger. She is 68 years old and is earning a $1.05 million base salary this season. The media vet has the distinction of being the longest-serving top journal at PBS ever. This March, she celebrates 20 years at the helm. Before cracking the whip there, she was the Chief Operating Officer of Educational Broadcasting Corporation, a parent of WNET. Oh, we'll get to them. Kerger was also the Principal Gifts Director for the Metropolitan Opera because nothing speaks to everyday Americans like the opera. Okay, we have the eyes, let's go to the ears. Here we have Catherine Marr, the President and CEO of National Public Radio. She's 42 years old and a little newer to her role, taken over in 2024. Compared to Paula, she's been up to a lot more in the last 20 years. Marr was the CEO for fundraising at Wikipedia. She's chaired the Signal Messenger app, which has had its high-profile moments. And before all that, she was a higher-up at UNICEF, the World Bank, and the National Democratic Institute. Now, only about a year into her role in March of 2025, Marr, along with Kerger, testified before Congress regarding allegations of political bias, in her case at NPR. This video is attached to an opinion piece on Fox News' site from last March. It's connected to the testimony video we're about to watch. It's titled, Broadcast bias. NPR, PBS bosses defend outlandish spin. ABC, NBC, CBS have a crazy reaction. And a subhead, head of NPR, confessed she regrets calling Trump a deranged racist sociopath. Meanwhile, the video is titled NPR CEO Catherine Marr says outlets should have covered Hunter Biden laptop story more aggressively. Woulda, coulda, shoulda. Alright, the first minute of this video is this rep yapping. You can't really see its terrible camera video work. He talks about NPR posturing itself as a non-biased news outlet, a home for noble journalism, if you will. He knocks them for not investigating the Hunter Biden laptop story. He said they even go as far as to call it not real. He says they dismissed the theory of the lab leak causing the pandemic, which everybody knew pretty early on came from a lab. Don't lie to yourself. He reminds Marr that NPR interviewed Adam Schiff about the Russiagate story, which turned out to be a hoax. And NPR didn't interview that shifter once, not twice, not 3 times, but 25 times they sat down with the Democrat on the most public of public airways. Now, the Congress guy goes on to quote an op-ed from an employee there, not just an employee, an editor, Yuri Berliner. They both say NPR has lost public trust due to bias.
Who do they bring in to fix it? They bring in Miss Mayhair, who has a history of commentary of promoting Marxist ideology, including critical theory. Said we should not use the terms boy or girl, has called our president a deranged racist sociopath, and said that our reverence for the truth has become a distraction that is preventing us from finding consensus and getting important things done. And one could look at that and think that maybe, in your view, promoting groupthink is more important than finding the truth. I thought we liked diversity of ideas, especially, and that as an online encyclopedia that you used to manage, activism was more important than accuracy.
Yeah, when he puts it that way, that's not a good look for any news outlet to hire someone with a background like that.
When we're talking about news and information and encyclopedias and things that are of national importance, I find that very troubling. Now you are here managing NPR, which is in part federally funded.
There are 2 possible reasons for this kind of hiring to take place with the year before this all. Number 1, I've said this before in regards to media newsrooms. They think most viewers, listeners, readers are stupid. They talk about us like we're fucktards. And or number 2, I guess they go hand in hand now that I think about it. They have their agenda. They know the rest of the media world is on their side/team. And they don't give a fuck about the consequences. Which do you think it is? Or is it both? Let's continue listening. We're going to hear this broad's answer.
Thank you, Congressman. First of all, I do want to say that NPR acknowledges that we were mistaken in failing to cover the Hunter Biden laptop story more aggressively and sooner. Our current editorial leadership...
Wuhan?
We recognize that we were reporting at the time, but we acknowledge that the new CIA evidence is worthy of coverage and have covered it.
Back to you, Jim.
Ooh. Ouch. I don't know. An establishment shill like Jon Stewart was screaming from the rooftops that it originated in a Wuhan lab long before any media outlets did. Long before that gain-of-function news came out. No efforts to further investigate during these times from our public outlets, though? I wonder why. They didn't dig? They didn't want to dig? They didn't hear those quiet, whispered rumors of a lab leak from millions upon millions of people? What other rakes can they step on here? Let's take a look.
Done to clean up the bias before. You mentioned I wasn't there for that. What are you doing to clean up and make sure that we have...
Absolutely. Thank you, Congressman. As I mentioned, I came in May. Mr. Berliner published his story 2 weeks into my tenure regarding stories that had happened prior. I wish that I had had the opportunity to speak with Mr. Berliner. I would have loved to have had him engage and come back to us with some suggestions as to what we could do editorially in order to address what he perceived as bias.
Too little too late, methinks. Now, how about our counterpart on the visual side of things? We heard all about the allegations of bias in our public media. What does old Paula Kerger say about it? She's been on the front lines for 20 years. We're talking Bush, Obama, Trump 1, Biden, Trump 2. I'm sure she's noticed from time to time and corrected course, right?
People often struggle to come up with examples of what really they're talking about. So we're always interested, obviously, in making sure that we're serving a multiplicity of viewpoints. You know, Bill Buckley made his home in public broadcasting with a series called Firing Line, which continues today with Margaret Hoover. We are interested in having different perspectives that we bring forward. But when I look at the range of our programmings on public broadcasting, I can't make any sense of an argument that we are somehow biased in any way.
Check out Homeboy's face here.
Sense of an argument that we are somehow biased in any way.
So we moved a little ahead in time to July of last year to this one-on-one PK here did with Fox News. Was she not paying attention to the examples? Was she not going to address any of them? Back to our questions a second ago. Is it agenda-driven with no lack of shame since the money keeps pouring in from taxpayers and underwriters, or is it just thinking everyone's stupid, or both? Well, we're going to learn that gravy train is taking off soon enough. I want to now read through Yuri Berliner's op-ed. It came out in April of 2024, so about 11 months before these testimonies, but it was the impetus, allegedly. Headline, I've been at NPR for 25 years. Here's how we lost America's trust. A veteran of the public radio institution says the network lost its way when it started telling listeners how to think, is the subhead. All right, Uri, what do we got? You know the stereotype of the NPR listener, an EV driving douche, Wordle playing, tote bag carrying, coastal elite. It doesn't precisely describe me, but it's not far off. I'm Sarah Lawrence educated, was raised by a lesbian peace activist mother, I drive a Subaru, and Spotify says my listening habits are most similar to people in Berkeley. I think that's in California. That's impossible! I fit the NPR mold, I'll cop to that. So when I got a job here 25 years ago, I never looked back as a senior editor on the business desk where news is always breaking. We've covered upheavals in the workplace, supermarket prices, social media, and AI. It's true, NPR has always had a liberal bent. But during most of my tenure here, an open-minded, curious culture prevailed. We were nerdy, but not knee-jerk activist or scolding. Say they are now. In recent years, however, that has changed. Today, those who listen to NPR or read its coverage online find something different. The distilled worldview of a very small segment of the U.S. population. Shit, I'll even give you a half, but that's still not enough. If you are conservative, you will read this and say, duh, it's always been that way. But it hasn't. For decades since its founding in 1970, a wide swath of America tuned into NPR for reliable journalism and gorgeous audio pieces with birds singing in the Amazon. Well, now the internet exists. Millions came to us from conversations that exposed us to voices around the country and the world radically different from our own, engaging precisely because they were unguarded and unpredictable. No image generated more pride within NPR than the farmer listening to Morning Edition from his or her tractor at sunrise. Back in 2011, although NPR's audience tilted a bit to the left, it still bore a resemblance to America at large. 26% of listeners describe themselves as conservative, 23% middle of the road, and 37% as liberal. So, not exactly split three ways, but yeah, 1 in 4 listeners of NPR consider themselves conservatives. That ain't the story these days. By 2023, the picture was completely different. Only 11% described themselves as very or somewhat conservative, 21% as middle of the road, and 67% of listeners said they were very, very or somewhat liberal. Oh, very or somewhat liberal. We weren't just losing conservatives, we were also losing moderates and traditional liberals. An open-minded spirit no longer exists within NPR, blah, blah, blah. That wouldn't be a problem with openly, Paul about to blah, 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 blah. Let's have our page break here. Like many unfortunate things, the rise of advocacy took off with Donald Trump. As in many newsrooms, his election in 2016 was greeted at NPR with a mixture of disbelief, anger, and despair. Then why do you do this? And if you can't handle millions and millions of people voting in a democratic process? Just to note, I eagerly voted against Trump twice, but felt we were obliged to cover him fairly. Yeah. But what began as tough, straightforward coverage of a belligerent, truth-impaired president, says who, veered toward efforts to damage or topple Trump's presidency. Persistent rumors that the Trump campaign colluded with Russia over the election became the catnip that drove reporting. At NPR, we hitched our wagon to Trump's most visible antagonist, Representative Adam Schiff. We spoke about this a few moments ago. Schiff, who was the top Democrat on the House Intelligence Committee, because NPR's guiding hand is ever-present muse. They talk about 25 interviews with Schiff and not really hearing from any other sides. But when the Mueller report came out, no credible evidence of collusion. NPR's coverage was notably sparse, so they didn't even give a mea culpa. Russiagate quietly faded from our program. It's one thing to swing and miss on a major story. Unfortunately, it happens. You follow the wrong leads, you get misled by sources you trusted, you're emotionally invested in a narrative, which you shouldn't be, by the way, and bits of circumstantial evidence never add up. It's a bad blow to a big story. But here's interesting what he says, what's worse. What's worse is to pretend it never happened, to move on with no mea culpas, no self-reflection. Especially when you expect high standards of transparency from public figures and institutions, the people you're covering. But don't practice those standards yourself. That's what shatters trust and engenders cynicism about the media. What the words, dude. Russiagate was not NPR's only miscue. In October of 2020, New York Post published an explosive report about the laptop Hunter Biden abandoned at a Delaware computer shop containing emails about his sordid business dealings. So blah, blah, blah. Same thing what they spoke about Catherine Marr about missing the mark. Laptop was newsworthy. But the timeless journalistic instinct of following a hot story lead was being squelched. During a meeting with colleagues, I listened as one of NPR's best and most fair-minded journalists said it was good we weren't following the laptop story because it could help Trump. Think about that, folks.
Pay attention to me! I'm trying to ruin you!
That is not a solo newsroom. That is not a newsroom on an island. Let me put it that way. As many newsrooms for the last 10 years. When the essential facts of the Post's reporting were confirmed and the emails verified independently about a year and a half later, we could have fessed up to our misjudgment. But, like Russia collusion, we didn't make the hard choice of transparency.
That bastard newscaster!
Politics also intruded in NPR's COVID coverage. One of the most dismal aspects of COVID journalism is how quickly it defaulted to ideological storylines. For example, there was Team Natural Origin, supporting the hypothesis that the virus came from the wild animal market in Wuhan, China. And on the other side, Team Lab Leak, leaning into the idea that the virus escaped from the Wuhan lab. The lab leak theory came in for rough treatment almost immediately, dismissed as racist or right-wing conspiracy theory. Anthony Fauci and former NIH head Francis Collins, representing the public health establishment, were its most notable critics. So, he lied. So did you follow up? And that was enough for NPR, became fervent moments, Team National Origin, even declaring that the lab leak had been debunked by scientists. What are we even doing here, folks? We should just end the episode right now. But that wasn't the case. I mean, more of the same. This is what people were paying for, and it just set up that testimony we heard from Marr at the beginning there. And, of course, the ridiculous face that the Fox News anchor made when interviewing the visual person as well. So that's how you have it. It would be nice to hear from more left-wing activists masquerading as journalists like Yuri here. Don't hold your breath. We're going to get a look at NPR's tone-deaf response right here. And guess who they're blaming for it? Not themselves like their boss pointed out. No. They're blaming Trump.
You are fake news.
This is from July of last year. Geesh, how bipartisan support for public media unraveled in the Trump era. When President Lyndon B. Johnson spoke after signing the Public Broadcasting Act of 1967, he marveled at the technologies like radio, television, satellites echoed at the worlds of Samuel Morse sending the first telegraph message. What hath man wrought? Johnson asked. And how will man use this invention? Johnson offered an answer to his own question, while work every day to produce new goods and create new wealth, blah, 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 blah. It's basically a history lesson on the CPB. Getting back to the matters at hand today, remember the poor bastard in Colorado who didn't want his business to make a wedding cake for a gay couple? Remember how he was put on blast by media across the country for exercising his First Amendment rights? Remember the media storm caused a fucking civil rights trial case? Pretty fucked up.
How fucked up is fucked up. That's fucked up.
Fucking thing sucks!
Anyway, podcast and YouTube host Steven Crowder wondered if he were to try and get a gay wedding cake made, but this time by a Muslim baker.
What do you think would happen if we went into a Muslim bakery and asked for a gay wedding cake? No need to wonder, we did it for you. What's really important is getting the picture and the writing. So it's going to be me and Benny. Will you have pictures there?
No, you have in Kroger.
In Kroger?
Yeah.
Like the grocery store?
No.
And I wanted to say Ben and Steven forever on the top. And then on the bottom it'll say, same-sex, legal now, congratulations. But everyone keeps sending me somewhere else. They said this is what you do here.
No, I don't want it.
Oh, okay, well, let's even say no picture, but you can write on it, Ben loves Steven forever, and have our hands maybe holding.
No.
But we want at least the writing, so, groom and groom.
Yeah.
There's 2 grooms.
Wedding?
Yeah, a wedding. Wedding is for 2 people getting married.
Well, how about that? Stunned or not, a private small business refused a customer. I mean, there's your headline. All the other aspects appear to be the same from a few years ago, no? Wacky stunt by Steven Crowder or not. Why not national news coverage? This was days ago, end of February. Aw, man, you don't think we attacked Iran to cover this up, do you?
And that's fucked up.
At Steven Crowder on YouTube, but all his big stuff is on Rumble, you saw right there. Same handle there, at Steven Crowder. Like and subscribe on both, and check out his show too. It's pretty wild sometimes. Sticking with Facebook, and I'll say it again, I hate nonprofits, but this is from the newsbusters.org. They released it last May, so about 4 months into the second Trump term. It says, study. PBS had 4 times more liberal guests than conservatives since President Trump's inauguration. So we can read more on that study, but taking a look at the graphic, you can see 173 to 41. PBS has 4 times the amount. You don't say. You saw it in Berliner's op-ed, an almost exclusively left-leaning audience for an all-taxpayer-funded model. All right, we went on that little tangent to exemplify the double, triple, even quadruple standards that go on with who gets to enjoy the Bill of Rights according to the media. So 100% of taxpayers must pay into public media like PBS and NPR. However, not 100% of taxpayers believe in gay marriage, and especially not the new Alphabet Mafia's agenda over the last 6 or 7 years. That being said, Paula and Catherine's state media outlets are catching flack, primarily for not adhering to 100% of American beliefs. Look, to each their own, I really don't give a shit, but I'm here to point out that not all people feel the way I do, and not all people feel the way these media outlets do. In walks WNET. Use AI to look up their issues, and you get stuff like this. New York's flagship public television station has faced several prominent controversies regarding questionable bias and editorial integrity. Let's dive deeper. The pension peril, they got an alliterative name for all of it, of course, it's media-focused. Funding controversies from 2014, WNET WNET drew significant criticism for a reporting series on public pension reform called Pension Peril. Ooh. It was later revealed that the series was secretly and solely funded by Laura and John Arnold Foundation, an organization with a known political agenda promoting the very pensions reforms the show covered. So they ran an infomercial. Cool. Now WNET initially failed to provide explicit disclosure of a commercial of this connection, leading to accusations that the reporting was ethically tainted and biased toward the founders' interests. You think? WNET leadership eventually admitted they, quote, made a mistake in the vetting process, but denied the foundation had editorial control.
You got a fucking problem, bro?
Now, I'm not sure this one pushes the left-leaning bias narrative here, but here's the next one. David Koch censorship allegations a year before that, 2013. Reports emerged that WNET officials pressured independent filmmakers to soften or suppress even a documentary critical of billionaire David Koch, who was both a major station donor and a trustee. This raised concerns that the station prioritized donor relations over journalistic independence. Next, we have workplace bias and leadership turmoil. This is from 2020. Here's, again, not sure this one's pushing the left-wing bias, but over 40 employees called for the resignation of CEO Neil Shapiro, alleging a culture of workplace discrimination and management's dismissal of proposals to address systemic bias. Basically, the DEI mob pushed out this clueless CEO. Now, think about this. 1 in 2 Americans are liberal, and about half, maybe even less of those liberals lean way lunatically left. I'll give you 1 in 5 folks are lunatics. Here at this public-funded company, trusted to bring unbiased truth, twice as many people lean ultra-left into that lunacy. 2 out of 5. And finally, we get to the big one here, though. In this case, AI is calling it content removal controversy. I think the controversy was from the content. Let's take a look. More recently, WNET reportedly removed episodes of the children's program Let's Learn. It featured a drag artist and discussed transgender identity. Oh boy. This occurred following political pressure and accusations of liberal bias from congressional Republicans. This is why I brought up the cake stuff. You think 100% of taxpayers approve of that?
Nope.
I'm shaking my head, listener. Again, to each their own, but this is not conducive to securing public funding, nor does it position the station in any form of objectivity, really, either. And here's why. There are plenty of slices of blame pie to go around as to how this movement about equality and love became a political one. But lines in the sand have been drawn. Sorry. Most drag queens are hilarious, and I'm not saying stay away from the kids, but stay away from using any sort of public funding to push agendas that not everybody agrees on. I do have it. I did find some of the video. Here's part of it they were showing on this PBS station that got the flack. Again, I don't think it was the removal that gave the controversy. I think it was the content itself that created the controversy. I could only find it on Matt Walsh's Facebook page, and yeah, this is the dude who wants to ban porn, this guy.
So, get your singing voices ready. And we're going to start with our hips. The hips on the drag queen go swish, swish, swish. Swish, swish, swish. The
Swishy.
shoulders on the drag queen go shimmy, shimmy, shimmy. Shimmy, shimmy, shimmy. Shimmy, shimmy, shimmy. Blah, blah, blah. Blah, blah, blah. Blah, blah, blah. The mouth on the drag queen goes blah, blah, blah. All through the town.
Walsh has a pearl-clutching reaction to it. Meanwhile, not the end of the world to me. Dude in drag singing awkwardly about oddly specific body parts. Still not meant for kids? Sure. But definitely not up for the state media to decide, and then use the money of people who disagree to do so. So WNET is just having some issues over the years, not doing any allegations of bias any favors. But wait, there's more. I have another bullet about the station, but forgot to make a slide. Who cares? Quick read. Wealth and donor influence at WNET. The board is predominantly composed of high net worth individuals from the finance and corporate sectors. For example, current chair James A. Atwood Jr. is a senior advisor at the Carlyle Group, a global private equity firm. Critics argue this donor-heavy structure can lead to self-censorship when programming touches on the interests of the wealthy elite. Yeah, well, solved your problem, though, of losing all the funding. So there's that disaster over in New York. There are also stories you can search about PBS and NPR stations having boards made up of 90 to 95% registered Democrats. It's rough optics when you'd like to say you deal in objectivity. And I bet you think this is only going on at WNET? Like I said, you can find similar examples from around the U.S. over the last few years, even in the conservative safe haven of Alaska. We're going to move along our timeline to October of 2025, so by now the gears of the defund public media movement are in full turn. We're about to learn all about that in just a sec. This is by Joel Davidson of the Alaska Watchman. The article is titled, Alaska Public Media CEO Defends Leftist Content but Claims PBS and NPR Aren't as Biased as Conservatives Say. A bit of a contradictory statement there. The man in charge of Alaska's largest PBS, NPR, and statewide publicly funded news organization does not think his media operation has much of a left-wing bias when it comes to news and feature content. This was the claim of Ed Ullman, president and CEO of Alaska Public Media. He was the featured guest on the October 22nd I'm Glad You Said That radio show hosted by Alaska Family Council President Jim Minnery. Minnery invited Ullman, good on Ullman going to join him, to talk about Congress's decision to end the $1.1 billion in taxpayer funds. Spoiler alert, we're about to get to that one. And that's a move that has hit local public media outlets hard. Conservatives, however, have largely praised the cuts, claiming the publicly funded media has pushed a liberal bias and progressive agenda for decades while relying heavily on public dime. Alaska Public Media had about 20% of its $8 to $9 million annual budget slashed and has been forced to reach out to corporations and wealthy nonprofits to make up the gap. It's comprised of, and it gives a cluster of stations, KSKA, KAKK. Since Congress rescinded the funding for National Public Media, Alaska Public Media has raised $3.6 million thanks to donations from groups like the Alaska Community Foundation and Rasmussen Foundation. So it's already at 33%, right? Just said it's 20% of its $8 to $9 million annual budget slashed, so 3.5 already made up more than 33%. Congratulations. Ullman, who has led Alaska Public Media for the past decade, defended public media as a piece to connect and provide understanding about where we disagree and what compromises we might make to benefit society and local communities. He argued that public media can serve communities without being compromised by the need to cater to advertisers. He also said his organization does a good job responding to the wants and needs of local communities. Minnery, however, noted that the Pew survey, check this out, found that 87% of those who named NPR as their main news source were Democrats. Nearly 9 in 10 of the listeners on NPR are Democrats. This is taxpayer-funded media, public media, meant for everybody, right? He goes on to write about the overall issues with bias in public media that we've been harping on this whole episode, and this Davidson guy is putting this Ullman guy through the ringer, but he hasn't gotten the specifics of what his local Alaskan station did, and I'm hoping he does. He goes through the Berliner op-ed, because that's what everybody on the right and anyone who wanted to defund this movement has been using and has pretty much kind of teed it up for that reason. Minnery then asked him to comment on the 2024 letter in which former NPR senior business editor Uri Berliner claimed Americans no longer trust NPR, the thing we just read. Ullman told Minnery that Berliner had the right to his opinion, but that it did not really apply to local coverage in Alaska. It has a point. He claimed local coverage was more balanced because the reporters are stationed in Alaska communities and know the people they are reporting on, quote. He then claimed the criticism from NPR's leftward bias is focused on just a, quote, few items. You have to look for the breadth of the coverage, Ullman said. Minnery retorted, saying that Alaska Public Media suffers from a lack of opposing perspective, even on local issues. Specifically, he pointed out how the coverage of Typhoon Halong has repeatedly used the storm to warn about the dangers of global warming. That's kind of what we have for best example there, reading through. Of course, this Ullman guy goes on to defend the LGBT content for children. Again, it's not for everybody, so everybody shouldn't have to pay for it. So even in a land where you have a majority of conservatives, they were getting left-slanted news, especially on the national front. But I'll say Davidson, I wouldn't say never addressed it, but that Typhoon example, again, he's writing about a radio interview, but the Typhoon example, I guess, is your best example of local issues outside those big pull quotes we can see there. And again, it's the quote from the pull quote. And that leaves a lot up in the air and fuels accusations of bias, attacks from the right on public journalism. But it may all be for nothing because the gravy train's leaving. Womp womp.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Executive Order 14290 on May 1st, 2025, President Donald Trump signed an executive order titled Ending Taxpayer Subsidization of Biased Man. Okay, which directed the CPB to seize all direct and indirect funding to NPR and PBS. In the rescission in July 2025, Congress passed a rescissions package that clawed back approximately $1.1 billion with a B in previously approved funding for public broadcasting. And of course, the official funding and federal funds for local stations officially ran out on September 20th, 2025. And then, you know what? Let's let KSDK in St. Louis tell you what happened.
Today, the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, that's the conduit for federal funds to NPR and PBS, announced it's shutting down. The announcement comes after the president signed a bill cutting over a...
Bummer. CBP began winding down operations late 2025 and officially closed in January 2026.
Bye-bye. 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 Bye-bye.
So what did we learn? Mess with the bull and get the horns? Fuck around and find out? Nah. Just don't fuck with other people's money, is what we learned, I think. Moving on. I want to talk about the Smith-Mundt Act, what it was and why it went away. It was introduced by Congressman Carl E. Mundt, look at that pipe, in January 1945. I think it got enacted, ratified, whatever you want to say, in 1948. But the act was developed to regulate broadcasting of programs for foreign audiences, post-World War II here, produced under the guidance of the State Department, and it prohibited domestic dissemination of materials produced by such programs as one of its provisions. So, whatever it made, Americans couldn't see it, but we were paying for it. The original legislation authorizes the U.S. State Department to communicate to audiences outside of the borders of the United States through broadcasting face-to-face contact exchanges, including educational, cultural, and technical, and publishing of books, magazines, and other media of communication and engagement. Why? Why? Folks, no. I know it's 1945, but we have pop culture, and plenty of it was going to reach anyway. I don't think we needed to spend more money and have our government be in charge of what was going out. I mean, how many foreign-born celebrities do you hear say how they learned how to speak English? Watching American TV, which made its way over there. Probably had no need for this, ever. And here it is, being a headache. During this time, the Soviets went hard to work propagandizing all their gotten territories of the early 20th century with pro-communist media. Not to be outdone, the USA thought ourselves above that and said the truth best told to the world, or so says the 80th Congress who passed it. Again, I think it's to combat Soviet communism? In fact, it had language making propaganda illegal for our government to print or broadcast, period. Taxpayer dollars aren't meant for half-truths and bullshit stories. Now, I would like to transition to 2012 with a video of Obama signing the 2013 National Defense Authorization, aka Spending Act, which included a little cute modernization law, but wouldn't you know they seem to have scrubbed those videos from the internet. Yuck.
I crippled in myself to inspire
So today, that little modernization was known as the Smith-Mundt Modernization Act of 2012. And guess what, kids? Government propaganda became legal again. There isn't much to add from the language of the new law. They say it was because Americans could access our foreign propaganda via the internet now. That's it. That's about it. Welcome to modernity.
Welcome to the world of tomorrow.
You see, it was more important than ever for public media sources to get their shit together over the last 14 years after this bogus legislation was passed. And instead, what did they do? They doubled down on their slant to the left. So much so, they created a little bubble of like-minded folks with no diversity of thought, expecting their handouts from whoever the fuck they wanted. And now those days are over.
Wire to wire.
How have our friends at the Associated Press handled all this? Remember, they're the big guns. They believe, like many others in the media, how a story is formatted decides whether or not it is journalism. Not so much the contents of the story. Let's summarize the episode so far. We've seen government propaganda get re-legalized, opening a slew of possibilities for the American people to absorb first, second, and third-hand propaganda. We've seen a movement of public radio and public television consumers skew nearly 90% to the left. We've seen the heads of these outlets lash out in emotion at the President of the United States. We've seen said leaders laugh off genuine content concern from the people who pay for it.
Pretty lame, Millhouse.
So let's see this first article and whom/what the AP blames for the loss of the taxpayer funding. Surprise! This is from August 1st, 2025. Scroll down to the end, and it's by Ted Anthony. Anthony writes about American culture and international affairs for the Associated Press. He has been with AP since 1992 and has reported from more than 30 countries. He's been traveling on vacation now for 34 years. Good for him. Let's get to reading. Corporation for Public Broadcasting to shut down after being defunded by Congress. Targeted by Trump. The corporation, CPB, a cornerstone of American culture for 3 generations, announced Friday it would take steps toward its own closure after being defunded by Congress, marking the end of nearly 6-decade era in which it fueled the production of renowned educational programming, cultural content, and even emergency alerts. The demise of the corporation known as CPB is a direct result of President Donald Trump's targeting of public media, which has repeatedly said it is spreading political and cultural views antithetical to those of the United States should be espousing. What a run-on fucking sentence just to try to blame Trump. The closure is expected to have a profound impact on the journalistic and cultural landscape. Keep saying culture, Jesus. In particular, public radio and TV stations in small communities across the United States. Really, because we took a look from New York all the way to Alaska, and it seems to be the same sort of issues. CBP helps fund both PBS and NPR, but most of its funding is distributed to more than 1,500 local public radio and television stations around the country. The corporation has deep ties to much of the nation's most familiar programming, from All Things Considered, Sesame Street, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, and Ken Burns documentaries. The corporation said its end 58 years after being signed into law by President LBJ would come in an orderly, quote, orderly wind down. In a statement, it said the decision came after the passage through Congress of a package that clawed back its funding for the next 2 budget years, about $1.1 billion. So, 2 years. It sounds like they're taking their ball and going home early. Policy changed Thursday by excluding funding from the corporation for the first time in more than 50 years as part of a broader spending bill, despite the extraordinary efforts of millions of Americans who called, wrote, and petitioned Congress to preserve federal funding for CPB. We now face the difficult reality of closing our operations. And then we talk about an effort from one side of the aisle as part of Thursday's committee deliberations. Senator Tammy Baldwin, a Democrat from Wisconsin, trusted culture, blah, blah, blah. The impact will be widespread. NPR stations use millions of dollars in federal money to pay music licensing fees. Where's the record scratch? Do they not know about AI music? So this is where the majority of money they're wasting is going. I thought it was going in everybody's pockets, like most anything that gets taxpayer dollars. It goes to whoever's fucking writing the essays for the money. NPR president and CEO Catherine Marr estimated recently, for example, that some 96% of all classical music broadcast in the United States is on public radio stations. Cool. I wonder what percentage of classical music is public domain. Roughly 70% of the money, federal money for public radio and television has traditionally been appropriated to the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, which distributes to NPR, PBS. We've gone through all this. Roughly 70% of the money goes directly to 330 and 246. I thought it was 1,500, so they're rewriting the same paragraph over and over. Ooh, that's garbage. Next. Ah, yes, taking your ball and going home. This one is called Corporation for Public Broadcasting Votes Itself Out of Existence. Now, we read that it was funded for another 2 years, but these journos decided the budget was just too big, I guess. This is from the past January 5th. It's by David Otter. It's quick. Leaders for the Corporation of Public CPB, a private agency that has steered federal funding to PBS, NPR, and hundreds of public television and radio stations across the country, voted Monday to dissolve the organization that was created in 1967. The corporation had been winding down since Congress acted last summer to defund the operations at the encouragement of President Donald Trump. Again, they're just blaming again one guy after he kind of had a mandate set to him by 75 million voters, and then followed up through congressional acts and legislation. Its final act would be to protect the integrity of the public media system and the democratic values by dissolving rather than allowing the organization to remain defunded and vulnerable to additional attacks, said Harrison. So, going quietly into the night? I don't know. Yeah, I mean, we have midterms coming up, so who knows? All this could be for naught, and $1 billion could go right back into the lefty hole that is public broadcasting. What do you think? Is that going out with a whimper? Is that going out hardcore and on their own terms? Do you think with the midterms coming around the corner this year that maybe they'll be back? I will say the AP circled the wagons to keep this hard left slant going in the journalism world. Let's hope people like this next guy get some defense as well.
Oh, sorry. Chief, sorry. Oh, is where we say, oh.
This is Jim Browdy. He's a midday host along with Marjorie Egan on Boston Public Radio.
They are. But first, speaking of knocking your socks off, yesterday we spoke with the endlessly inspiring Maria Ressa. We really hope you heard it. If you didn't, you should go back and listen to it. She, of course, is a journalist. She won the Nobel Peace Prize in 2021. She stood up to a murderous dictator with her small and mighty news organization in the Philippines, facing down arrest from the state, a deluge of violence from her critics. Her message to us in the moment of attacks on press freedom on the day Trump issued that order Marjorie mentioned to defund PBS and NPR is clear. American democracy now rests with all of us.
It depends on Americans. Actually, I've been really surprised by, the deer in headlights. When I listen to people say, well, we'll wait till the midterms. I was like, how do you know the midterms are even going to happen? This is a lesson we learned in the Philippines. The rights you lose today, you are going to have to claw back with much more than you had if you...
Oh my God. 75 million people voted for Trump and his cabinet. Jesus Christ. That's the globalist victim view, man. And this woman sounds like she went through some real shit, allegedly. Good Lord. Well, anyway, this is Jim and Marjorie's show, often aired live from the Boston Public Library. This episode is May 2nd, 2025, the day after the executive order. Jim and Midge are definitely part of that massive overbalanced number graphic we saw earlier regarding guests. Some real big-time left-wing elites get plenty of airtime on their show, and this lunatic Nobel Prize lady not excluded. She goes on to babble about how Trump is vindicative, and that's why the funding is stopping. Again, this whole episode on different reasons. Jim is highlighting an interview they did the day before on their show. That's what this woman's bite is. She can fucking yap, man. Jim finally opens his mouth to rally the troops here.
Silence becomes consent.
Silence becomes consent.
Yeah.
877-301-8970. Do you agree that silence becomes consent? Yesterday, lawyers and unionists rallied in Boston for May Day, International Workers' Day, and around the country. But beyond showing up in the streets for a sanctioned protest at a designated time, is it time for more disruptive action? Where are you holding the line in your daily life? And as she said, we'll play this for you again in a few minutes in her brilliant speech in Stockholm when she accepted the Nobel Peace Prize. What are you willing to sacrifice for the truth? Our number is 877.
Well, without my consent, I sacrifice a good chunk of my paycheck every 2 weeks.
That was about as inspirational a 25 minutes
we get tons of
that we have had in the quarter
radio
century we've
number
been on the
listed.
Well,
Not
as we talked
covering
about,
it up.
I mean, she...
Well, not a lot of people will be calling in, I don't think. Cue the sports music again. Boston is a sports town, baby. Let's take a look at the standings. I mean, the ratings. This is a report from this past January's book. Sports station, the Sports Hub, is number 1 in the Magic, and then Kiss, and News. More sports, WEEI. We're going to do an episode on them for sure, a particular show, actually, down the road. Public radio, that's not Jim's station. Country, classic rock, and then there's Jim, finishing 14th with a 3.5 share. So 3 out of every 100 cars you see. Got that going. No doubt folks tuning in to hear their send-off to CP be this past January. Now, I look back through some other books, though, all jokes aside, pretty consistent share number and rank in the market for middays. I couldn't get the specific age demo. I'm guessing this is overall, but I'm pretty dumb and can't read. I know this show is meant for ages 40 to 65 plus, and I just couldn't get those numbers. We're not pointing this out to knock Jim. I went back through a lot of publicly available segments. Jim's a former lawyer and seems like he's trying to be a straight shooter. He's shooting hard left, but it seems like he was trying to get honest news out of folks, from what I've been back and listened to. Up until this shit.
Even the news monster is acting strange.
Check this out. This is according to ZipRecruiter. As of early 2026, the average annual salary for a radio host in Boston is approximately $54,300 to $58,300, which breaks down to roughly $26 to $28 an hour. While the majority of, or typical salaries range between $43,500 to $65,000 annually, top earners in the market make upwards of $94,500. Look, now, I'm sure this is an AI bot bullshit, just pulling stuff from wherever. Let's say this ZipRecruiter info is wrong by nearly a half. Outside the massive sports shows on the Sports Hub, those morning and afternoon drive shows fucking dominate. Those guys still make big bucks. But let's say this website, like I said, is wrong by nearly one half. So let's say most make about $100K. Let's take a look at what the guy who finishes in 14th makes. So this says $345 about base. Total earnings, it says he made $500,000 in 2022. And we're talking 3 times as much dough as people pulling in way more years than him. And some people say it's even more. This is Boston Radio Watch on X. So he's reposting himself at $506K. Another round of job cutting at WGBH today. 15 more jobs caught by the defunding blade. I think he means cut. They mean cut. Their $620,000 general manager, $490 Jim Brody were not impacted, citing lost federal funding. GBH cuts 15 more jobs, so that's his link there. It's Boston Radio Watch on X. Folks had that in mind when they went to the polls last November, too. Of course, the majority of funding is created by underwriters and viewers and listeners like you. I get that. But taxpayer dollars still make up, or should I say made up, a percentage of that. Oh. Let's play a game.
It's game time. Game time. Game time on the TNJ pod. Gonna guess what they said next on the TNJ pod. Was it racist? Was it sexist? Or all of the above? Was it inspirational or over sensational? Of course it was.
Sticking with Jimbo and the Boston area, this is Homeboy interviewing Marty Mean, the president of the University of Massachusetts System and former top dog at UMass Lowell. I believe this is following the times when a bunch of Eastern colleges were catching flack for anti-Semitism, like professors were telling students not to let the Jewish kids come out of their dorms or go to class and shit. It was wild. And I think a bunch of presidents had to testify before Congress, but a bunch of them refused to condemn the behavior. Wild, wild times. Wow! So there's that context before we press play. And by the way, this is Mean's Instagram.
And as you know, 9 colleges and universities have been targeted by Trump. You sign that agreement, you're going to get extra money. You don't sign that agreement,
we gave you the context.
If universities in the United States, if they give in and to ideological pressures, we lose our universities for what they are. Universities are very, very independent.
Like not being mean to the Jewish kids?
Trump says to you, I'm going to take all your research money away at UMass, all your research money. All you have to do is sign on the dotted line, and it all continues and then some. You resist that?
I would. I hope he's not listening to the show.
No, I'm serious. I mean, that's a pretty...
We set this up with why the funding would be withheld. Also, you know why 4 and 5 doctors agree or 4 and 5 dentists agree? They have to, so they get paid, funding for their research work through mostly government grants these days. It didn't start with Trump. I don't know why we're insinuating that it has started with him. All right.
Game time!
Mean's prestigious position was once held by whom? Is it A family member of a famous mob syndicate leader? Or B, someone who was accused of extorting hundreds of thousands of dollars from a real estate developer? Or C, Whitey Bulger's brother? Or D, all of the above? And the answer is right after this.
Next, you can't handle the tease.
Coming up next.
You tease me.
Coming up next. Spring training's in full swing, and next week we're going to bat for legislation.
An amendment to Florida's so-called Don't Say Gay bill requires educators to out LGBTQ students.
The bill is actually called Parental Rights in Education on the floor right now.
In those first days, a fragile coalition seemed possible.
The Senate was going to have a bill by June. We would have a bill by July, and we would go to conference, and this would be over.
Ever notice some proposed bills get over-scrutinized by stations while others seem to receive 2-minute advertisements? Ever notice which ones? A look at how some news outlets seemingly advocate for certain laws while putting the big J in journalism where they see fit. That's coming up in the next episode of That's Not Journalism. Now back to the game.
Game time!
The prestigious position of the University of Massachusetts system was once held by whom? Is it A, family member of a famous mob syndicate leader? B, someone who was accused of extorting hundreds of thousands of dollars from a real estate developer? C, Whitey Bulger's brother? Or D, all of the above? Our answer is D, of course. William Billy Bulger is a former politician, and his 18-year tenure as president of the Massachusetts Senate is the longest in history. After leaving office, he became president of the University of Massachusetts. Bulger was the younger brother of the convicted mob boss James Whitey Bulger, who led the Winter Hill Gang and received harsh criticism for refusing to distance himself from his brother, who was convicted of participating in 11 murders and sentenced to life in prison or to cooperate with authorities after he became a fugitive. He was the president of UMass from 1996 to 2003. In 1999, Whitey's longtime aide, Kevin Weeks, pleaded guilty to a number of charges related to Whitey's crime spree and became a cooperating witness. Weeks revealed that in 1995, William Billy talked to Whitey during an arranged phone conversation just 2 weeks after Whitey fled a pending racketeering indictment. When William testified before a grand jury in 2001, a federal prosecutor pressed him without success for information on his brother, and here's the quote exchange, little cut in between the two. So just to be clear, you felt more loyalty to your brother than you did to the people of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts? I never thought about it that way, Bulger replied. But I do have an honest loyalty to my brother, and I care about him. That's my hope, that I'm never helpful to anyone against him. Like police and, prosecutors and victim families. I don't have an obligation to help everyone catch him. There's plenty more to read if you want, including the real estate issues where UMass Lowell used to be called Lowell Tech. Point being, don't always trust the media's judgment in their experts, especially from the academia world. Sadly, we got to do our own vetting sometimes. Until next time.
I'm sure those windmills will keep them cool.
Windmills do not work that way! Good night!
Jamie likes Millhouse. She does not. Una likes Millhouse.
Nobody likes Millhouse.
Griffin, Diane.
And the president said, call Ben Bradley and tell him fuck you.
This suit is not black. No, not has to be the end.
Tragic news tonight. 120 dead in a tidal wave in Kuala
Token, all the great African-American news people have learned to hide their demonic tribe speak.
Not journalism.